A little while back, we made a video discussing a lot of different sorts of tuning methods and getting into the idea of what's the best one. One in particular comes up a lot, pressing into the center of the head and using your eyes and a drum key to remove the wrinkles around the edge. We talked about this in season 1, and today we want to do a deeper dive on this. Whenever we choose to subscribe to a specific tuning method, we're going to run into some positives and also some possibly serious pitfalls and blind spots when we adhere to that method without using any other aspects of our senses to study it. The one we're using today is most commonly referred to as a Rob Brown method because his videos are very popular and a lot of people have watched them and learned this method from him. So we're going to use his methodology today and see what we can get out of this sound. First things first, before we dive into this, I just want to say up front, because we're not listening during the course of this tuning method, this is less about tuning and more about applying tension to the head. As far as we're concerned, tuning has to do with the sound that you're making. So if we're going from 0 to the completed setup without ever listening to it, this isn't really tuning it for a certain sound. This is just achieving a kind of tension and then seeing where we end up. Now, this doesn't invalidate this as a method, and if you use this to get the sound that works for you, more power to you. That's totally okay. This is not a critique of the functionality of this in terms of it being a manner of tensioning. We just want to understand it as best as possible. Step 1 is, if you have tension on the heads, release all of that tension. If you're installing new heads, just put them on. Don't tension anything up yet. Next, we're going to apply finger tightness to all the lugs on the batter head. Not listening to anything, just as tight as we can get it with our fingers. The next thing we want to do is use the palm of one of our hands and apply pressure to the center of the drum head so that we can observe the wrinkles that appear along the edge of the drum head near the rim. After we see these wrinkles, we're going to take a drum key and kind of indiscriminately go around the lugs, each time tensioning the single one at the tension rod until the wrinkles disappear. It's explicitly stated that the order that we do this on the lugs is not important, and that the specific amount of turns or pressure that we're applying is also not important. This is strictly, we're looking at it and turning it until we don't see any more wrinkles at that lug, and then moving to another one. Once we've done this process to the batter head, we flip the drum over and do the exact same thing to the reso. It's explicitly stated that this is all that we need to do in terms of getting a great sound out of the drum. We don't need to concern ourselves with individual or relative tensions of the lugs or the relative pitches of the two drum heads as they interact with each other. Additionally, it is stated that this should get us the lowest functional tuning of a given drum because by removing the wrinkles, we are applying just enough tension to make the head function without adding any more than is necessary. Let's hear this rack tom now as we've done this. First things that I'm noticing as we're listening here is that the overall sound of the drum is higher than I normally tune this drum when I'm just doing my own thing and getting the sound that I'm looking for. Thing 2 is I can hear when I strike the center of the drum that we don't have even tension on all of the nodes. This means that though we have a pure tone in the center of the drum right at the strike, the drum heads are not actually in tune with each other, and they're not in tune with themselves either. That doesn't mean that this isn't a usable sound, but to go in saying that this is the way to get the good sound out of your drum is a little bit of a misnomer, and there are going to be a few things we're going to go through after this demonstration that are going to get into the nitty-gritty. Another facet of this method, as featured in the Rob Brown videos, is that if you want a lower sound out of this drum, rather than tuning the whole thing up or down, you choose a single lug location, reduce tension by a quarter or more turns at that location, both on the top head and on the same lug on the bottom. This is a little confusing because it's already posited in this methodology that this is the lowest fundamental tuning that we can have. This is the lowest that will function, but now we're taking it lower. So that's a little bit confusing. Additionally, we're reducing tension at a single lug, which is going even further in the direction of the heads not being in tune with themselves. Let's do that to this drum and see what we get. Okay, this did lower the pitch of the drum, which is not surprising. If we reduce tension anywhere, it's going to lower because all of these are interacting with each other at the same time. Now, having said all that, because we don't have even tension around these drums, we are not getting as much resonance as we could have because we don't have even pressure from the drum head onto the bearing edge, allowing everything to resonate and speak to each other. Additionally, depending on which lug you choose to lower to get this effect, if it's the last one that you did when you were doing the wrinkle tensioning in the first place, there's a high likelihood that that particular one is already under much less tension than the rest of the head because we were tensioning unevenly in the first place. This could mean that if we use this method, that one could loosen more over the course of the performance, possibly even fall out, create rattles, whole bunch of problems. Let's go a step further. Let's move to the floor tom because it is also explicitly stated that this will work on any size tom, any dimension that you might have. We're trying to set ourselves up for success here by only using this method on the batter head and tuning the resonance side the way that we normally would in tune with itself in the range that we normally use. And just to reiterate, we're using the exact same method, finger tightening the batter head, pressing in the center with the palm of one hand, and using our eyes to identify the wrinkles around the edge of the head from that pressure and remove them in whatever order we feel like with a drum key. All right, let's hear it, see how it sounds. First thing to notice, also higher than I expected given that the intention here is to get the lowest usable sound. This amount of tension on the batter head is a fair bit higher than we normally tune this drum for any video that we make here. So already it's feeling a little bit boxy. I'm definitely hearing some overtones that feel a little bit strange for a lower modern floor tom sound. Feels a little stiff under the stick and overall, like, not my favorite. This methodology does not particularly account for the depth of the drum that we're working on either. This floor tom is a little bit shallower than a lot of 16 by 16s. This is only 13 inches deep. But at the end of the day, that is going to affect things beyond just getting tension on the head through this method, and we do have to take that into account as far as the sound goes. At this juncture now, what we've done is taken the general pitch range that these two drums ended up with the previous method and used our ears to get each of the heads in tune and make as beautiful of a sound as we can in that range, but utilizing our ears to get them balanced with each other and making sure that intervallically between the two heads we're getting what we need. Let's hear a back-to-back comparison of the previous method and what we've done now. Initial takeaway is we prefer the second sound, and that has to do pretty primarily with the fact that we used our ears to develop that sound and didn't use any kind of set of rules to get there other than trying to get the heads in tune with themselves and listening beyond that. Two heads in tune with themselves do not necessarily make a great sounding drum. We also have to take into account the pitch of each of them and how they're interacting at a given size, given depth, all of that. Now let's talk about what we can run into when we are trying to tune or tension a drum just with our eyes and leaving our ears out of the equation. The first thing that we're looking for in order to get a good sound out of a drum is to have even tension at all of the lug locations. This is reasonable because having good and even contact and pressure all the way around is going to allow the drum to resonate most freely because it won't be fighting itself between spots that have more and less tension. When we only look at the drum to take the tension out and also tension around the drum indiscriminately, the high likelihood is that the collar is not going to be centered on the drum in the same way as it would be if we were being even about how we tensioned up the drum from one side to the other, perhaps in a star pattern or something like that. This specific tenet of this method flies in the face of what we were talking about in our earlier episode, which is to say we have to go slowly with very small increments. The idea of applying a large amount of tension to one lug on an untensioned head and then moving to another one and doing it again really throws everything out in terms of even knowing if we're having even tension, because this head is going to be sliding around on the drum enough that we can't possibly know if we're getting what we think we're getting unless we listen to it. Starting with such an uneven tensioning is going to affect how easy or hard it is to try out different tunings, even just moving the whole drum up and down. And additionally, having a lot of different tensions happening and playing on the drum for a long time is going to shorten the life of the head for sure. The next thing that we got to talk about is the idea of the lowest usable sound of the drum. The truth of the matter is that the only way to know what the lowest usable sound of your drum is to listen to it. If you tension it without listening to it and hit it and just say to yourself, that's as low as it goes, how could you possibly know? You have to get it in tune and then raise and lower the drum as a whole to be able to tell if it's going to function at a lower or higher tension. If you get your head in tune with itself, fully clear at any tension, and then lower it incrementally, always making sure to add a little bit of pressure back once you've gone down to alleviate the stiction and other things that happen, you will discover that you can go much lower than you think if what you do normally is visually remove those wrinkles. These are the sorts of things that we really care a lot about here, because there's nothing wrong with using a method like this to get a sound, especially if you need to do it quickly. But if you take a method and say, this is the dogma, I'm done, I'm not going to think about anything else, this is the way, I'm not going to listen to anything else, including my drums while I'm tuning them, then you're only putting limitations on yourself. And hopefully you want to know what your drums are capable of rather than just getting the quickest shot to the end so that you can start hitting them. We were sitting here talking earlier about things that this reminds us of in other aspects of life, and taking a quick fix approach to getting a usable sound out of a drum is reminiscent of fast food. This is kind of fast food tuning. It works, it does the job, it fills you up. If you're in a mad rush and you're not concerned about calories or anything like that, fine, no problem. And if this works for you, please hear us. That's okay. Do exactly what works for you. You don't have to do anything that we do. This is just information. Now, having said that, that means that there are inherent limitations. So if those limitations are not things you butt up against, totally fine. If you want to know more about your instrument, what it's capable of, and possibly how much better it could sound, then consider the possibility that digging a little bit deeper might be a fun experiment and might get you something that is exciting. Just on a little bit of a personal note here too, when I watch videos that are about getting a great sound out of your drums quickly, I often, and it's true of the videos that we're talking about here too, get the impression that the idea that tuning is important is some kind of gatekeeping by those of us that care about this. and those of us that know how to do it and think that it's important. And the other voice that comes in is the one that says, you don't need all of that, all that nerdy stuff. You don't need that. It's all noise, and it's not important, and it doesn't matter. And what's important is getting a usable sound out of your drum as fast as possible and feeling like you know what you're doing. That's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that you could know and would be useful for you. So hopefully the fear around learning more and training your ear and recognizing your blind spots and what you don't know can be a positive experience and an opportunity for growth, rather than something that sends you down a path that is the least resistance, lowest common denominator, I don't want to have to think about it kind of approach to this instrument that we claim to love.